Have you ever heard the phrase, the best defense is a good offense? This is the mantra of aggro decks in Hearthstone, and one of the best aggro decks right now is Murloc Paladin. This deck uses the Murloc tribal synergy to chop down your opponents quickly. Murlocs like to stick together and fight in groups. Use cheap Murlocs to flood the board early, then buff them in the mid-game to claim victory. If you want a splashy deck that wins games fast, then take a look at these aquatic creatures. To play the deck, you'll need full play sets of Grimescale Chum, Murloc Tidecaller, Vilefin Inquisitor, Hydrologist, Rockpool Hunter, Coldlight Seer, and Murloc Warleader. All these cards are here to set up an early board presence. Rockpool Hunter in particular turns your turn 1 play into a real scary threat. Coldlight Seer brings many of your tiny Murlocs out of range of board clears, while Murloc Warleader pushes for crazy amounts of damage. Hydrologist is one of those cards that brings the deck together, letting you get a secret that helps you protect your early game creatures, or can put your opponent in a position to make bad trades, or even just lock your opponent out of that win. Blessing of Kings, Spikeridge Seed, and Bone Marrow all act as defensive tools in the late game, or can push for even more damage. Bone Mare and Spikeridge Steed also give the minion taunt. Because you are going to go wide on the board, giving one of your minions taunt and a lot of health means that it's tricky for your opponent to make good trades. Generally, you want your board to be as hard to deal with as possible, and that's just what these cards do. Rallying Blade helps you protect your early game minions from your opponent's board. Gentle Megasaur and Cobalt Scalebane pushes your board of Murlocs over the top. Gentle Megasaur gives all of your Murlocs on the field an adaptation. This is huge in just about any situation. Giving your board +1/+1, or even +3 attack, pushes for crazy amounts of damage, while giving it +3 health or Divine Shield keeps them from being removed. And if you get Divine Shield, you can even equip Rallying Blade to give them all +1/+1. Cobalt Scalebane is overall a very hard minion to remove, and it also gives one of your minions +3 attack at the end of each turn. If your opponent cannot kill this minion soon, and you're able to pump out even more minions, it's just a matter of time for them to hit the concede button. Finge of the Flying Star, Sunkeeper Tarim, the Curator, and Tyrian Fordring are 4 legendary minions that round out the deck. Each of these minions are really powerful in their own right, but really shine here. Finge, for example, is able to bring 2 Murlocs onto the field with each kill that it does. So with one of the buff cards, Finge can bring you back onto the board if you are behind, or he can even just close the game with the stealth ability. Sunkeeper Tarim can make a small 1-attack minion into a real powerhouse by making him into a 3/3, or even bringing down one of your opponent's tricky to remove creatures down to a 3/3. Tarim is also just a good tempo play because a 3/7 is hard for most decks to deal with. Tyrian is just one of the best cards in the game. It just is. And the Curator can draw us 3 cards. Because Cobalt Scalebane is our dragon and Gentle Megasaur is our beast, we can pretty consistently draw at least 2 cards in the late game. If you're starting to feel a little discouraged from making the deck because of these legendaries, don't worry, I'll get back to that, just stick tight. But first, let's talk about what you should mulligan for. When looking at our opening hand, really think about the early turns. Look at how you want to be ramping to the mid-game, and how you're going to grab possession of the board. With that said, no card does this better than Rockpool Hunter, and should be the #1 card that you look for in your mulligan. All your 1-drops and the rest of the early 2 and 3 drops also are in high demand. If you're able to start on turn 1 with one of your 1-drops, then into Rockpool Hunter, you'll be put miles ahead of your opponent. Grimescale can buff the card you play on the next turn. Vilefin is hard to remove, and Tidecaller puts the pain if paired with Rockpool, making him a 3/3 on turn 2. I know this sounds redundant, but you want early cards first. Throw away anything that costs 4 or more. The deck has a real snowball quality to it, which means if your opponent struggles at all to control the board, you're going to win. But because of that, you have a hard time coming back if you lose control of the board in the mid-game. Turns 4 through 6 plays often rely on you having something on the board to buff. If you need to remove stuff, you're going to have a hard time. That's not to say it's impossible. Like I said before, Finja is a lifesaver in situations like this. Watch out and try not to overextend if your opponent is one of those decks with board clears. Murloc Paladin crashed into the metagame earlier this year and dominated along with other aggro decks like Pirate Warrior. Because of the popularity of these two decks, players started running Hungry Crab and Galaka Crawler in their decks to try to counter them. For a while, you were either playing with Pirate Warrior in Murloc Paladin, or you were trying to counter them with the crabs. The meta was aptly named Crab Meta, and led to a decline in the popularity of Murloc Paladin and Pirate Warrior because they were being countered, and then to the decline of the crab decks because they had nothing more to counter. We then got the Caverns Below changes, Knights of the Frozen Throne was released, and even more balance changes, with one card in particular, Murloc War Leader, being changed. A few short months ago, Murloc Paladin was one of the most played decks in the metagame, but after the Murloc War Leader change, it dropped to one of the least played. The strange thing here is that the stats don't match Murloc Paladin's drop in popularity. It's still considered a tier 1 or tier 2 deck. It has great matchups against many of the decks in the metagame at the moment, and its win rate is one of the highest out of all decks. It's strange that more people aren't playing it. Murloc Paladin loses to other board central decks like Tempo Rogue, Token Shaman, and Zoo Warlock, but wipes the floors with any Druid, Hunter, Mage, or Priest. Don't turn in the towel if you are running into some of these bad matchups though. Like with any matchup, it's really how you play and knowing your opponent's deck. Zoolock and Token Shaman are two matchups that are pretty close to 50-50, so if you are able to play to their weaknesses, you should be golden. Like I mentioned before, this deck runs 4 legendaries, and that brings up the price of this deck to around 8,000 dust. More than half of the deck's cost comes from these legendaries, with 3 of them costing 4,800 dust in total, and one of them being from an adventure, which means you have to spend real money or a lot of gold. While that may sound like a lot, don't be discouraged. The only key cards in this deck are really your early game Murlocs, and the support style cards like Bone Mare, Rallying Blade, and Gentle Megasaur. Because you're playing an aggro style deck, your expensive late game legendaries are less important overall. In fact, these cards have a lower win rate when played than any of the other cards. That's not to say that they're not good. If you have them, put them in. But it's not the end of the world if you don't have them. You could go in a more aggressive route by putting in Grimscale Oracle, or a more popular option with Righteous Protector. Adding in Consecration would aim your deck more towards mid-range, but could also help fix the problem with you getting back onto the board. Some people even tech in Spellbender to break through taunts. But the biggest replacement for these cards would be Stonehill Defender. While again, more of a mid-range card, it can help protect your early game board and get you into the late game. But the real reason this is here is because of the Discover effect. Stonehill Defender discovers a taunt minion. The kicker is, because of the way Discover works, you are prioritized to be shown class cards over neutral cards, which means you are more likely to see Paladin taunt cards than neutral ones. At the moment, Paladin only has 5 taunt minions, and all of them are pretty good, with 3 of them being legendaries. For the price of a rare, you're going to be able to play with one of these powerful legendaries. While not guaranteed, it's very likely that you're going to see one of these legendaries come up every other game or so. So if you want to play Murloc Paladin, craft all the epics and wait on those legendaries, because you can live without them. You can play this deck in different variants, depending on how you like to play. There are some variants that play with Patches and Dread Corsair for more aggression. Others put in Stonehill Defender and Righteous Protector to protect your other minions, while others go for a more greedy route, putting in the Lich King for more late game. Kobolds and Catacombs just released, and people have already started using some of the new cards in Murloc Paladin. One of the big new cards that people are using is Call to Arms, which lets you pull 3 minions from your deck. Some people have also used Unidentified Maul and Corridor Creeper. This deck in particular is used to reach Legend. Other decks opt to use the Paladin legendary weapon, Valanar. This weapon can give a buff to a tiny minion to make it actually powerful in the late game, so you're not just drawing a dead card. So if you want to be playing with some of the new cards, definitely take a look at some of these. One deck that I personally ran added Galaka Crawler to counter Tempo Rogues and Zubot for even more buffs. So don't be discouraged if you think one card doesn't fit right. There are other options that could work. Murloc Paladin is still around and kicking and is just as powerful, so go hop in and try for yourself. These aquatic creatures are ready to take down your opponents with you. Thanks for watching my video, and please subscribe if you want to see more in the upcoming set. Have a great day.